Hello and welcome, or welcome back, as the case may be, to the Atlantean Archive. Thanks for stopping by today. Now, this should be a fairly short video today. I want to do some commentary on what we've gotten recently on the Salem's Lot 2024 adaptation. Many of you, like me, have been waiting for this for a long time now. It seems like a project that's been locked in development hell, but recently we've made some progress on it. We got some still images, we got a 2-minute clip, and then today, if you haven't seen it, you're not aware, a full official trailer dropped. So you can actually take a look at that. Let me know what you think if you've seen the images and the clip and the trailer. If not, take a look. I'll put some links below in the video description. Check them out. Let me know what you think. Again, this has been locked in apparently development hell for so long, and so many of us had wondered, what exactly does that mean? Does that mean that we've got a bad movie on our hands or what? Originally, it was supposed to be a theatrical release, and then, so many of us were thinking, how could you do Salem's Lot as a one-episode theatrical release? It's almost a 500-page novel. It's very dense. The two previous adaptations, both miniseries, one done in 1979, one done in 2004, they're about 3 hours long each. And even they had to truncate and make changes to fit it all within that time frame. So how are you going to be able to do this in around 2 hours? That seemed iffy. The theatrical release got pushed back a couple of times. Some people involved with the project who said they were extras on the film were talking about how it tested badly and extensive reshoots had to be done. I heard some of that out there. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. It's just what I heard. And then supposedly we were going to be released on streaming, but that wasn't even certain then. Then Stephen King came out and said he had seen it and it was great. He endorsed it. But as so many of you have pointed out on this channel, Stephen King has endorsed a lot of stuff in the past that many people did not consider quality material. We'll be generous and put it that way. So I wasn't sure what to make of that. I mean, he said it had this slow burn, old Hollywood feel to it. But again, in 2 hours, when you're trying to cram all that kind of material into it, a dense novel like that, I didn't know how slow burn and old Hollywood it could really be, but it gave me, reason to think about it. And then we got the confirmation, yeah, it's coming out on streaming service finally, but I'm still wondering about it. Hollywood executives, they routinely blow massive amounts of money on bad movies, stuff that tanks at the box office, crashes and burns. And when you look at some of these movies, you're like, they should have known that this was a bad movie. And they didn't for some reason. They greenlit it, they backed it, they promoted the heck out of it, and it burned. Predictably, it burned. Kathleen Kennedy, anybody? So it could be that this movie was so bad that even those guys could see that it was bad and they didn't want to release it. Or it could be that it was so good that they didn't think it was any good because they're used to packing trash. So I didn't know what to think about that. But finally, confirmation on streaming service. It is going to show on Max in October 3rd, I think, or the 10th. I forget which one now. And then we got the still images. We got a 2-minute clip and then the trailer today. And interestingly enough, I've been looking at some of the comments on social media here, but I wanted to share my own reactions to you, my evaluations, just going on what little we know so far and what we've seen. And then I want to get into some thoughts on adaptations, and particularly loose adaptations. So if you have seen any of this new material, if you've seen the clip, if you've seen the trailer, you've seen the still images, and you have thoughts on those, share those with me, please, by all means, in the comments. And hear me out on what I'm going to say about adaptations and let me know what you think as well. I know people have very strong feelings on this stuff, and I do too. Salem's Lot has been important in my fiction journey. I consider it one of the best vampire novels ever written, next to Dracula itself. It's obviously been very influential on many people. It's influential in my own creativity in the genre. It's one of Stephen King's best novels of the ones that I've worked. It's the only one so far that I've done a dedicated review for on this channel. The 1979 miniseries adaptation with David Soul, James Mason, Bonnie Bedelia. I consider that a masterclass in atmospheric horror. One of the best horror films ever made. In my personal rankings, the best vampire film ever made. Your mileage may vary on that. I'm not blind to the fact that it has problems. It does. But still, it's an outstanding movie to this day. Light years better than so much other stuff that Hollywood has spent so much more money on. And then the 2004 edition or adaptation that came out, I really wanted to like that, especially when I found out Rutger Hauer was going to be playing Barlow. Rutger Hauer is such a great actor. And he was going to be playing a Barlow closer to what the version that's actually in the novel, as opposed to the 79 version where Barlow is a Nosferatu type character with no dialogue. And then I saw it one of the biggest letdowns ever. It was, in my opinion, a dumpster fire. I know there's people that like it. No insult if you do. Again, in the comments, let me know what you think. But I thought it was a dumpster fire. And so going into this, I was very trepidatious because I just don't think that Hollywood knows in general how to make a good horror movie anymore. They've used blood and gore and hokey dialogue and crazy jump cuts and jump scares and that sort of thing. And to me, it seldom works very well at all. I was not a fan at all of the It movies that came out recently. I realize I'm in the minority on that, but I did not like them at all. Had my own reasons, won't get into detail on that. But so I was very trepidatious about that. And then this material started coming out, and I saw the changes that they were making, or at least it was evident that they were making extensive changes. And my first thought is, why would you do that? And after everything else leading up to the release of this film has been so much in doubt, I'm like, oh, great. I mean, what kind of a disaster are we possibly looking at here? So my first thoughts when we saw the clip recently, I almost made a video then, but then I heard we were going to get the trailer, so I held off. I did not like the clip at all. I thought the dialogue was hokey. It had a comic book feel to it. I mean, literally a comic book feel. There's a scene where they're in the Marston house and this door opens behind them. It creaks open. There's blackness on the other side. And I could literally see that as a comic book panel. A door opening with the word creak written over top of it. And then we cut to the reaction of the cast as they're looking back at it. And that was another comic book panel in my mind, as with these characters looking back kind of like in this pose and literally the word gulp written next to somebody. That's the feel that I got from it. Again, hokey dialogue. I just was like, oh man, I guess my feelings were right after all. This is going to be bad. And then the trailer dropped. And I have to say, I am cautiously optimistic. It's possible that they may have overused CGI in this, as is often the case these days. It looks like the fog is probably CGI produced. Or at least that's the way it looked to me. And I've never seen realistic looking CGI fog. I don't know why you just don't use a fog machine. But if that's the worst part of this thing, then, we're getting off lucky. But it looks like they may have done that. It looks like we're getting the camera cuts and the jump scares. But to be fair, the 1979 version, which I love so much, has jump scares in it. So that, if you're going to fault one, fault the other for that. Again, is it overused? I don't know. This is not enough for us to be able to tell that yet. We're going to have to wait and see. But it looks like some of that is in there. I hope they don't rely on it too much. There's a scene where I guess Matt Burke is warding off Mike Ryerson with a cross, and Mike, for some reason, is plastered up against the wall and just kind of oozing away from him. And I'm like, why do you do that? It's supposed to be a creepy effect. It just looks dumb to me. But again, that was part of my problem with the It movie. Some of those sequences that I guess were meant to creep you out that to me just looked silly. But then some of the other scenes that they showed looked promising. Like maybe there is some good atmosphere in this film. Maybe Stephen King had something there. The song that they played over the trailer, Gordon Lightfoot's Sundown, absolute genius. I mean, I love Gordon Lightfoot anyway. He's one of my favorite singer-songwriters of all time. And that song in particular, Sundown, you better take care if I find you've been creeping around my back stair. Perfect for a vampire movie. So yes, salaming here, you've done a great job with that. Absolutely inspired. Love that. And again, it looks like there's some general creepiness about it. So we're going to have to see. We're going to have to see what they've done with it. When we get the release, we'll finally be able to see the whole thing and find out exactly what they've done. I'm hoping for the best. I'm more optimistic than I was. So the trailer actually lifted my spirits, gave me some reason to hope. Again, let me know what you think in the comments. What's your impression of it? Now that leads me into the question of adaptations, and particularly loose adaptations. I want to share these thoughts with you real quick. And I promise it will be quick. I know I ramble on. Adaptations in general. Let me phrase it like this. Dracula, obviously the vampire novel, the one against which every other novel is ultimately measured. How many times has Dracula been adapted for theatrical release, for TV movies, in TV series? I mean, Dracula's shown up in a lot of TV shows. How many times has it been done on Broadway, in the theater, in cartoons, in comics, all that sort of thing? How many times? And of all the times that it's been adapted, how many of them have actually been faithful to Bram Stoker's novel? Almost none. There are very few instances where an adaptation has come close. Christopher Lee complained about that endlessly. And the 1977 BBC production Count Dracula was actually the closest that I've ever seen to getting to Bram Stoker's novel. Lee did one in 1971. Franco, I think, was the name of the director. That was a little bit closer in some ways, but still far off in other ways. So all of these various productions of Dracula that have been done over the years, hardly any of them are faithful to the original story. Nosferatu, the first theatrical adaptation of Dracula, and it was an adaptation of Dracula. As a matter of fact, Mrs. Bram Stoker sued the company over that, and the court ordered that all the copies of that movie be destroyed. Famously, 1 or 2 survived, and that's why we still have it today. But they basically ripped off Dracula, and a lot of people love Nosferatu. It's been considered a classic. Especially those of you who really love the 1979 Salem's Lot, and you love the way they handled Barlow in that. Well, Barlow is based on Count Orlok from Nosferatu. That's the Nosferatu look. They changed his name when they made the film from Dracula to Orlok because that was a little too on the nose. They still got slammed. But yeah, that's where that look comes from. It comes from Nosferatu. Everybody knows that. But we don't stop to think about that being an adaptation of Nosferatu, which in turn is an adaptation of Dracula. And a loose adaptation. It follows the story in some ways, but departs drastically in other ways. So you've got so many versions of Dracula released over the years, and some of them really good. Hammer's 1958 Horror of Dracula, one of the best horror movies ever made. Excellent climax, the first time Christopher Lee ever put on the cape. That is an adaptation of Dracula, and an extremely loose one. It borrows Bram Stoker's locations, his characters, but it does its own thing with them, and it's a fantastic film. Moving into other areas, Howard Hawks' 1950s movie, The Thing from Another World, is an adaptation, and a very loose adaptation, of John W. Campbell's short story, Who Goes There? Very loosely adapted, but it's a great film. It holds up to this day, still very watchable. One of my favorite films of that era. It's an absolute science fiction classic to this day, but a very loose adaptation. And then again, in 1982, John Carpenter readapts it, much closer to John W. Campbell's original story, but still different in a number of ways. And again, a fantastic film, one of the best in the genre. Too gory for me, but that's my taste. It's still a fantastic film. So you've got these kind of examples of how adaptations can be made, even very loose adaptation of a source novel or a source film in some cases with remakes, and you can still get a fantastic product. You can still get something worth celebrating. You can still get something that people remember and show to their kids, family, and friends. Years down the road, we're still talking about some of these movies. So just because the new Salem's Lot is departing drastically in some ways, as is very apparent, from Stephen King's novel, does not necessarily mean it's going to be a dumpster fire, okay? I think that's important to remember. Something else that ties into this that most people are not talking about, or may not even know about, Salem's Lot itself is an adaptation of Dracula. It's a very loose adaptation of Dracula. If you know anything about the writing of that novel, what Stephen King has said about it himself, and if you pick up on the nuances of it, especially the figure of Barlow, Barlow is Dracula. The idea for the novel is Dracula comes to America. Stephen King envisioned, what if Dracula went to America in the 1970s instead of Britain in the 1890s? That's where Salem's Lot comes from. So it's a very loose adaptation itself of Dracula. So we can't fault the movie out of the gate, without even having seen it at this point, for being a looser adaptation of Stephen King. Loose adaptations can work as long as the story's good, the acting is good, the dialogue is good, the production values are there. As long as things are handled well, you can take core story elements and characters and do something completely different but still fantastic with them, as the examples that I've given you illustrated. So Is this different? Yes, it's going to be very different than anything we've seen before where Salem's Lot is concerned, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be bad. So let's give this thing a chance. Again, looking at the trailer today, I thought, there may be some good moments in this. Even if I don't like the thing overall, it's still possible that it's got some atmosphere in it. It's still possible that the people who made this thing have some appreciation for the source novel, and in particular to the 1979 miniseries. Many of them who were involved in this may have grown up watching that, for all I know, and they kind of wanted to do their own spin on it. That's what I get, the impression I get from people who have seen it. They said it's more like a remake of the 79 miniseries than it is an straight up adaptation of the novel. So we'll see where it goes. But for those reasons, and give me your feedback on this, let me know what you think, what your mileage is on it. Let's give it a chance. Let's see where it goes. We will find out. But those are my thoughts on it so far, just what we've seen, and my thoughts on adaptations in general. Again, let me know what you think in the comments. Until next time, live long and prosper. May the force be with you. And for you fans of the 1979 Salem's Lot in particular,
ciao.
Ciao?
Ciao. That's a familiar Italian expression meaning goodbye.
Well, you learn something new every day.
Mm-hmm.